Hello, and welcome to part 4 in our series on how to battle Satan and win. In our last lesson, we started to look at the power of God. We focused on God the Father and his power, his unlimited power as we saw it in creation, how God could just simply speak and bring things into existence out of absolutely nothing. Then we looked at more of the spiritual end of God's power in the sense of how God has dominion and power and great strength over the spiritual realm, and what he did with Jesus Christ and raising him from the dead and putting him far above all principalities and powers and all of the spiritual forces that are in the world today. We want to continue to look at the power of God, and the reason we're doing that is because in the beginning of our instruction here of how to fight Satan, God is telling us to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. And that's what we're looking at, the power of God's might. And we want to do it in this lesson by emphasizing the power that exists in Jesus Christ. Last lesson was God the Father, just a little bit of a picture. Now we're going to look at Jesus Christ. First, some examples of the power of Christ physically, over the physical elements of the world. In Matthew 9, verses 27 through 30, we see that Jesus heals the blind with just a single touch of his hand. When Jesus departed from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out and saying, "Son of David, have mercy on us." And when he had come into the house, the blind man came to him. And Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be so." And their eyes were opened. Here's 2 people blind, and Christ just simply touches their eyes. Look at the power that's here, and they immediately see. He heals the crippled by telling them to walk, John 5 through 9. Now a certain man was there and had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, it's important to understand that too. There's no shenanigans going on here. This isn't somebody who, maybe got sick the last week, fell down, couldn't walk. It's a week old, it's a month old, he just needed time to recuperate. This man was absolutely crippled, and he had been there for 38 years. So there was no ifs, ands, or buts that this man was not able to walk. He said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred, but while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, like a matter of fact, no big fanfare, "Rise up, take your bed, and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. This man was, back up, we know Jesus does these things, but back up and think about this. The power that is involved. This man was crippled for 38 years, could not walk. Jesus just simply speaks to him. The power that comes from he just simply speaks and says, "Rise up, take your bed, and walk." And the man gets up, takes his bed, and walks. He not only heals him, he not only gives him the ability to stand on his feet again. The man hasn't walked for 38 years. He immediately knows how to walk. He's immediately capable of walking. There's no, okay, now I healed you, whatever caused you not to be able to walk, I fixed that, but now you got to go to therapy for the next 6, 7, 8, 9 months so that people can work with you, hold you by each arm, get the strength back into your legs, because you got to learn how to walk all over again. None of that. He immediately is able to walk. And he's not only able to walk, he doesn't need people to help and hold him. He's able to pick up his bed. He's able to carry things and walk away. The power of God to instantly and immediately heal the blind, the crippled. He heals a leopard. Matthew 8, 1 through 3, the leper who has a skin disease. A disease that is, that's putting it lightly, a disease that is eating away at their flesh. And Jesus just comes to the person and just simply speaks to them. And Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately the leprosy was cleansed. He not only took the disease away, he healed the flesh and the skin immediately, simply by a touch of his hand. The woman with the issue of blood, Mark 5, verses 25 through 30. Now, a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years. 12 years she's been battling this, and she suffered many things from many physicians. She's going everybody she can to get fixed. She had spent all that she had and was no better. Not only not better, she's worse. She goes to all of the doctors, everyone she can go to, spends all of her money, and all she is getting worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if any may but touch the hem of his garment, I shall be made well. Watch the power here. Don't lose sight of the power. Immediately, when she reached out and touched the hem of his garment, I believe the picture from this, that there's a great crowd around him and she's down on the ground, crawling on her hands and knees because the hem is the bottom of his garment. And she's saying in herself, I know who this man is. I know he's the Son of God. I know he has the power to heal. If I can just make contact with the bottom of his robe, I know I'll be healed. And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, he turns around in the crowd and he says, who touched my clothes? Now here you've got an example of Jesus healing somebody. He didn't even do anything. This woman's faith that when she made contact with him, power was immediately released, that she was instantly healed of this issue that she's had for the last 12 years. See here also a side note, the importance of faith. Because when he turns around and he says, who touched me? If you read the rest of the passage, his disciples looked at him and says, what do you mean who touched you? We're in the middle of a crowd here. Everybody's bumping up against you. Everybody's touching you. What do you mean who touched you? Everybody's touching you. But there's only one person that touched him that had faith in his ability, and it immediately, instantly released power that healed her in a moment's notice. That's power, faith and power in action, because she believed. Matthew 8, 5 through 13, he heals the centurion's servant. But look at how he does this. Now, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. And Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof. Follow how he understands God's power. But only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. I say to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. What is he saying? He's saying, Jesus, I know who you are. I know the power and the authority that you have. And he's saying, my servant here is paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. But you don't even have to come to the house. I know that. All you have to do is speak it. All you have to do is will it, and I know it'll happen. I know how to give orders. I know how to tell this person, do this and do that. All you have to do is say, be healed, be well, and I know it'll happen. Man, is that faith. Even Jesus marveled. When Jesus heard it, he marveled, and he said to those that followed, assuredly, I say to you, I have not found such faith, not even in Israel. Then Jesus said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so be it done unto you. And his servant was healed that same hour. Now, for our context here and our emphasis here, Christ had the ability and the power to heal that person without even being in the person's presence. Didn't have to go to him, didn't have to touch him, didn't have to see him, just said, let him be healed, and they were healed. On and on we can go with these examples. Luke 7, 11 through 15. Christ raised the widow's son from the dead. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him, and a large crowd. And when he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a large crowd from the city was with her. And so here's the funeral procession coming down, and she's there and all the people, and they're bringing the coffin down, ready to bury this young man. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and he said, do not weep. Then he came and he touched the open coffin, and those who carried him stood still. Put his hand out and stopped the coffin and said, hold up, fellas. I got something to do here. And he said, young man, I'm telling you, arise, get up. So he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he took him and presented him to his mother. Can you see that picture? The poor woman's on her. She's just getting ready to bury her son, and the funeral procession's going down. And here comes Jesus, almost as a matter-of-fact thing. Puts his hand down and says, hold up, fellas. Hold up. Got something I want to accomplish here. Walks over to the man, no fanfare, no big nothing. Young man, get up. Whoop! He said, it's almost comical. It's not comical, but picture, he sits up in the casket and he starts talking. I can only imagine what he said. I don't know that we could. And see the graciousness of the Lord. He takes him by the hand and he presents the young man to his mother. But he raised him from the dead. There's no doubt he was dead. They're carrying him in the coffin to bury him. And he just speaks and he raises him. Lazarus, we don't even have to read it, but we know Lazarus is in the grave 4 days when he goes to raise him. Even in Martha's sister saying, Lord, please, he's 4 days, he's got a stink already. You can't be doing that. What does he do? He just goes up to and he says, I told you, if you would only believe. And he stands in front of the tomb and he cries with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus, who has been dead for 4 days, his body's already decaying, gets up. He's bound hand and foot, so I don't know how he walked out of there. I don't know if he just glided along the ground or whatever. But out he comes. And Jesus looks at him and he says, untie him, unwrap him. He's got to be hungry. Go give him something to eat. Give him something to eat. Unloose him and set him free. Absolute phenomenal power. I remember hearing someone say once that there might be truth to it, but when he stood in front of those tombs, he cried, Lazarus, come forth. That he had to specify, because if he didn't mention just Lazarus' name, everybody would have come out of their graves. Everything. If he just stood there at the cemetery and said, come forth, boom, 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 they'd have all been coming out. You think not? That's what's going to happen in the last times when Christ opens up the graves and tells us to come forth. We're just going to be coming out of the graves. That's the power of God. When you see him raising Lazarus from the dead, he actually limited his power. He kept it, hold on, fellas, just Lazarus today. That's all there is. Rest of you stay where you're at. That's power. That is power. He heals the blind. He heals the lame. He heals the leprosy. He raises the dead. He puts life back into the dead body. Look at him with the elements. Matthew 8, verses 23 through 27. Now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him, and suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with waves. I mean, the waves, they're crashing over now in the boat. And what's Jesus doing? He's asleep. He says, I always love this story. Here you see peace and contentment and faith. The waves are crashing over the boat. This boat's ready to go down. What's Jesus doing? He's asleep. He's sound asleep. He's relaxed. He's calm. Then his disciples came to him and woke him up and said, Lord, save us. We're perishing. We're going to die. This boat just wasn't being rocked a little bit. They think they're going down. That's the kind of storm that is that. But then he said to them, why are you so fearful? O ye of little faith. You see the picture here now? And this is a picture we need to use in doing battle with the devil. They are facing physical circumstances that they think they're about to die. You want to be out in the middle of the sea when the waves start crashing over you and you're ready to sink? You would think, well, certainly this is a time to worry. Certainly this is a time to be concerned. Certainly this is a time to be upset. Christ doesn't go, he doesn't look at him and smile and go, hey, pretty big storm here, huh? Them waves are pretty big. I can understand why you guys are upset. I mean, this is pretty, that wind's blowing and the waves are crashing. It's pretty funny, isn't it? But don't worry about nothing, fellas. No, he doesn't respond like that. He looks at him and he goes, what's your problem? Me paraphrasing now. His point was, I don't care what the circumstances are like. I'm with you. I'm here. I'm in the boat with you. What are you worried about? That's the way we need to be. No matter what's coming against us, Christ is with us. The ability to overcome whatever storms are there is with us. So what does he do here? He says, he rebukes them for their lack of faith. He says, O ye of little faith. Then he arose and he rebuked the winds of the sea. And there was a great calm. The wind is blowing, the sea's raging, and he just goes, stop. knock it off. He rebukes, enough. Calm down. Whatever he said, it doesn't tell us what he said. Peace, be still. Boom. The waves go down. The sea is obeying him. The wind stops blowing. And what do the people do? So the men marveled, saying, who can this be that even the winds and the sea obey him? That's the power of Jesus Christ. Move it even greater in the physical realm. Colossians 1:15 through 17 says, he is the image of the invisible God, the first over all creation. For by him all things were created, Jesus Christ, that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. Consist means to hold together. Christ created this planet, and he's holding the whole thing together. If he decides that not to hold it together, he could simply will it and wish it, and this planet would explode. It would just blow up, and that would be the end of it. He could vaporize this whole planet in a heartbeat if that's what he wanted to do. He is above all things, created all things, and he holds it all together. He keeps this globe together so that the atoms just don't go whoosh and have the biggest atomic explosion you've ever seen. That's power. Now, we've seen power over physical things. Look at power over spiritual things. And again, this is the source that we're supposed to draw from. Matthew 4, verses 8 through 11. This is after Christ in his spiritual realm now. After Satan tempts him, Christ tells Satan to leave. Matthew 4, 8 through 11. And again the devil took him up on an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. And he said to him, all these things I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. And Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan. This is the last temptation of the three that he gave him. For it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only you serve. Then the devil left him. And behold, the angels came and ministered to him. What's the point that I'm putting here? There was all the temptations, and we're going to look at that later of how you answer the devil. But the point is, when the devil himself, personally, in person, comes and tempts Jesus Christ, when Christ was done with it and said that's enough to himself, he simply had to look at Satan and say, go, away, gone, get out of here. And Satan left. He didn't argue with him. He didn't fight him. He didn't debate with him. When Christ told him to go, he went. That's power. Matthew 5, 1 through 13. You've got Jesus Christ casting out the demons. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him. Look at the power of this man, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart, and the shackles broken into pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, day and night, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. Here's this man possessed with multitude of demons, and they would bind him up with chains, and he was so strong he just snapped the chains and break them. No one could control him. Now we see Jesus coming on the scene. And when he saw this man possessed by the demons, and when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, what have I to do with you, Jesus, the Most High Son of God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. For he said to him, come out of the man, unclean spirit. Then he asked him, what is your name? And he answered, saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. A legion was thousands. And he said, for we are many. Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. Now there were a large herd of swine. You know the story that goes on. There's 2,000, 3,000 head of pigs there, of swine there. And he says, 2,000 it was. And he tells them, go, you can go into the swine. And they enter the swine, and they immediately run off the cliff, kill themselves. What's the point here? Here is a man possessed with probably thousands of demons. Thousands, because they went into 2,000 swine. But when they see Jesus, there's no arguing with him. Jesus comes to him, and they come to him and they says, are you come to torment us? Are you come, we beg you, why are you here to torment us? And Jesus tells them, leave. And they don't go, whoa, wait a minute. Let's get a picture here now. There's one of you, and there's at least a couple thousands of us. Are you kidding me? This is the kind of odds that I would like to have. 2,000 against 1, that ain't bad. It didn't happen. As soon as they saw Jesus Christ, knowing who he is and the power that he has, they immediately fell down and they begged him. No matter what he told them to do, they were going to instantly do it. For whatever the reason, they want to be in some type of a body. So they said, don't just cast us out of this, man. Let us go into the swine. And he went, okay, go. One word, thousands. Boom! He sent them flying. That's power. That's spiritual power. This man was exceedingly fierce, but they come and they just immediately start begging him, not arguing with him. In the end, we're going to see that Satan is cast into the bottomless pit. Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. The angels come down, and when it's time for Christ to set up the millennium, he takes Satan himself and all of his demons, and casts them into the bottomless pit, puts them in chains, and they're in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. There's no way Satan's saying no. There's no way the demons are saying no. God says, Christ says, into the pit you go. And you're going to be there for 1,000 years. And in they go. And then he comes out after the 1,000 years. Revelation 20, verses 7 through 10. Now when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sands of the sea. Satan hasn't learned his lesson. He's going to come out and he gathers an army that you can't count them. There's so many of them. And they went out on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city. Look at what God does. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil who was deceived was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. You see the power that God has over spiritual forces? So what have we looked at here? What have we looked at with God the Father? What have we looked at here with Jesus Christ? God instantly creates this world, this universe out of nothing. He has the power to speak. He simply creates by his will, and things are done. The sovereign will of God is obeyed at all times, past, present, and future. Jesus Christ has the ability to heal physically. He can heal the blind. He can heal the sick. He can raise the dead. He has spiritual power over Satan and all the demons of hell. He has but to speak to them, and they absolutely must obey his command. We have God who creates. We have Jesus Christ who commands the demons. Genesis 18:14 says, "Is there anything too hard for Jehovah?" We're looking at the power of God, because as we start to look at the armor of God, remember, we're dealing with, let's get back to the beginning where we were. We're dealing with the beginning of what God says, where he says, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. That's why we're looking at these things here. That's why so that we really have an idea of what the power of God's might is. So we really begin to start to comprehend the immeasurable power that we have available to us. Ephesians 3:20 through 21. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be glory in the church by Jesus Christ to all generations forever and ever. Amen. Charles Hodge writes here, he says, this simple idea of the omnipotence of God, that he can do without effort and by his simple will whatever he wills, is the highest conceivable idea of power, and is what is clearly presented in scriptures. And God tells us as we begin this warfare, as he begins to equip us, he says to us, be strong in my power and in my might. It sounds like we are standing on solid ground. That is the beginning, and this is only the beginning. This is what Satan dreads that we would understand. This is what he wants to blind us to. This is what he wants to keep us from, because he knows if we fight him in our strength, he'll beat us every time. But he also knows if we understand this and draw upon the strength of God, he has absolutely no chance of victory, and he will be defeated every single time. Praise be to God for his unspeakable gift to us. In our next lesson, we're going to begin to look at the pieces of the armor of God that God has commanded us to put on. Thank you for watching, and may the Lord richly bless you.